Lena stood at the edge of the narrow mountain path and felt the cold wind move across her face. She had climbed for hours and her legs felt heavy, but her heart felt restless. The world below looked small and distant, and the noise of the town no longer reached her ears. She came here to escape the silence of her empty home and the weight of memories that followed her every day. Since her mother passed away, life felt paused and unfinished. This journey was not planned with joy, but with a need to understand something she could not explain. Lena believed that answers sometimes hide in places people forget. The idea of the abandoned cliff cabin came from an old book that once belonged to her mother. The book was filled with notes written in faded ink and pressed flowers between the pages. One evening Lena noticed a folded map hidden inside the back cover. The paper was old and weak, but the drawing was clear enough to follow. Near the mountain edge there was a small mark with the word cabin written beside it. Her mother never spoke about this place, and that made it feel important. Lena felt a strange pull toward that location, as if it was calling her quietly. The climb was harder than Lena expected, and each step tested her strength. Loose stones slid under her boots and the path disappeared at times. She used her hands to hold onto tree roots and broken branches. The air grew colder and thinner as she moved higher. Her breath came slower and her fingers felt stiff. Still she kept going because turning back felt harder than moving forward. Every step felt like a promise she had to keep. As Lena climbed higher, memories filled her mind without warning. She remembered her mother sitting near the window during rainy evenings. She remembered her voice calm but distant, as if she carried stories she never shared. Lena often asked questions, but her mother always smiled and changed the topic. Now those moments felt heavier than before. Lena wondered if the cabin had something to do with those unanswered questions. The thought made her chest tighten but also gave her strength. The forest slowly changed as Lena moved closer to the cliff. The trees became shorter and the ground turned rough and dry. The sound of birds faded and the wind became stronger. Clouds moved slowly around the mountain, making the view appear and disappear. Lena stopped for a moment to rest and looked down at the valley. Fear touched her heart, but it did not stop her. Instead it reminded her that she was alive and still searching. After a long climb, Lena finally saw the cabin. It stood close to the cliff edge, as if holding onto the mountain with effort. The wooden walls were dark and broken in places. The roof leaned to one side and vines covered parts of it. One small window faced the open sky and the door looked barely attached. The place felt quiet in a way that was different from the forest. It felt watched and waiting. Lena walked slowly toward the cabin and every step felt careful and heavy. The ground near the cliff was uneven and the wind pushed against her back. She stood in front of the door and hesitated. Her hand reached for the handle but stopped midway. A feeling of fear mixed with curiosity filled her chest. She wondered why her mother never mentioned this place. She wondered what waited inside. She pushed the door gently and it opened with a low sound. Dust rose into the air and the smell of old wood filled her nose. The inside of the cabin was darker than she expected, but sunlight entered through cracks in the walls. There was a small table near the window and a chair lying on its side. Shelves lined one wall and most of them were empty. The floor creaked under her weight as she stepped inside. Lena moved deeper into the cabin and looked around carefully. She noticed marks on the walls that looked like they once held pictures. Near the table she saw a small box covered in dust. Her heart beat faster as she knelt and opened it. Inside were old letters tied together with string. The handwriting looked familiar and her hands began to shake. She recognized her mother's writing immediately. She sat on the floor and slowly untied the string. The letters were addressed to someone named Mara. Lena did not recognize the name but felt connected to it instantly. The words spoke of fear, hope, and choices that changed lives. Lena read about a decision made many years ago and a secret kept to protect someone. Tears filled her eyes as she read each line carefully. She realized that her mother lived a life she never shared. As Lena read the last letter, her hands rested on her chest. The letter spoke of the cabin as a place of truth and reflection. It spoke of a future shaped by courage and forgiveness. Lena felt her world shift quietly inside her. This place was not just abandoned wood and stone. It was a piece of her past waiting for her to arrive. She knew that leaving now would not be possible because the discovery had already changed her. Lena sat on the cold wooden floor and held the letters close to her chest. The wind outside moved through the cracks and touched her skin. Her eyes stayed on the words she had just read again and again. Her mother had carried a life full of choices that Lena never knew. The cabin felt alive now as if it remembered every secret spoken inside. Lena stayed still and allowed the silence to speak to her heart. She slowly stood up and looked around the cabin with new eyes. Every corner felt important and every shadow felt meaningful. She walked toward the shelves and noticed a loose wooden panel. Behind it she found a small cloth bag resting quietly. Her hands trembled as she opened it with care. Inside were a metal key and a folded paper with a name written softly. The name on the paper was Mara. Lena whispered it without sound and felt a strange warmth. The letters spoke about a sister who had walked away long ago. They spoke of pain caused by fear and love mixed together. Lena realized that her mother was not alone in her past. There was another life connected to hers hidden from time. Lena placed the letters back into the box and held the key tightly. She felt the weight of it and wondered what it opened. Her mind filled with questions but no clear answers yet. She knew the cabin was only the beginning of the truth. Her mother had left clues, not explanations. Lena decided to stay and search every part of the place. She moved toward the window and looked out at the cliff. The sky was changing colors as evening approached. Clouds moved slowly and the wind softened. Lena felt calm for the first time in many months. The fear she carried began to loosen its grip. She understood that this journey was meant to heal, not harm. As night came, Lena prepared to stay inside the cabin. She cleared dust from the table and placed her bag nearby. She wrapped herself in her jacket and sat near the wall. The sound of the wind became steady like breathing. Her thoughts turned toward her childhood memories. She remembered moments when her mother looked far away. In those memories her mother smiled, but her eyes carried weight. Lena now understood that smile was strength, not distance. She realized her mother protected her by keeping pain hidden. The letters showed love written through sacrifice. Lena felt tears slide down her face without shame. This pain felt honest and freeing rather than heavy. Later that night, Lena noticed a sound beneath the floor. It was soft like wood shifting under pressure. She knelt and pressed her ear to the ground. The sound returned faint but clear. She followed it to a corner near the table. There she noticed floorboards that looked newer than the rest. Lena used her hands to lift one loose board carefully. Beneath it was a small space covered in dust. Inside she found a wrapped journal tied with string. Her breath slowed as she lifted it gently. She knew this was something deeply personal. The cover held the same handwriting she saw in the letters. She opened the journal slowly and began to read. The words described a young woman full of fear and hope. They spoke of two sisters who loved each other deeply. A choice forced them onto different paths. One stayed to protect while the other left to survive. The pain of separation stayed for many years. The journal spoke of Mara leaving the mountain town. It spoke of promises made to meet again someday. But life moved faster than courage. Years passed and silence grew between them. Lena felt the weight of lost time through those pages. She realized how silence can change lives quietly. As Lena turned the pages, she felt closer to her mother than ever. She saw her not just as a parent but as a person. A person who carried fear and love equally. The cabin felt like a bridge between past and present. Lena understood why she was led here. This place was meant to prepare her for what comes next. The last page of the journal mentioned a town near the sea. It spoke of Mara living a simple life under a new name. It ended with hope, not regret. Lena closed the journal and rested her hands on it. Her heart felt full but determined. She knew her journey was far from over. Morning light entered the cabin slowly and touched Lena's face. She opened her eyes and listened to the quiet mountain air. The night had passed without fear but filled with heavy thoughts. The journal rested beside her like a promise waiting to be kept. Lena sat up and felt a new kind of strength inside her. She knew the truth had begun to change her already. She packed her bag carefully and placed the letters and journal inside. The metal key stayed in her pocket close to her heart. Before leaving, she stood in the center of the cabin. She looked around as if saying goodbye to a living place. The cabin no longer felt abandoned to her. It felt like a guardian of memories and courage. The climb down the mountain was slower than the climb up. Lena walked with care and purpose. Her mind stayed focused on the town near the sea. The journal mentioned a place where Mara started again. Lena felt nervous but hopeful about what she might find. She wondered if Mara even knew about her. As Lena reached the lower path, the forest sounds returned. Birds moved through the trees and sunlight warmed the ground. The world felt wider and more welcoming than before. She reached her car and rested her hands on the door. A deep breath filled her lungs with calm. This journey was no longer about escape but connection. The drive toward the sea took many hours. Lena passed quiet villages and open fields. She stopped only to rest and drink water. Her thoughts returned again and again to the journal. She imagined Mara as a young woman leaving the mountains. She wondered what kind of life she built afterward. By evening, Lena reached a small coastal town. The air smelled of salt and the sound of waves filled the streets. The town felt peaceful and slow. Small houses stood close together with lights glowing softly. Lena felt nervous as she stepped out of her car. She was close to the truth now, and there was no turning back. She found a small place to stay near the shore. That night she could not sleep easily. The sound of waves felt comforting, but her thoughts stayed busy. She read parts of the journal again under soft light. One name appeared often under a different form. The name Mira stood out as a possible new identity. The next morning Lena walked through the town, asking quietly. She spoke to shop owners and cafe workers. Most people smiled politely and shook their heads. Then an older woman near a flower stand paused. She said the name Mira sounded familiar. She pointed toward a small house near the far edge of town. Lena walked slowly toward the house, feeling her heart race. The house was simple with blue paint and a small garden. Flowers grew near the door and the windows were open. Lena stopped a few steps away and hesitated. This moment felt heavier than the climb to the cabin. She wondered if she was ready to be seen. She stepped forward and knocked gently on the door. Footsteps moved inside and the door opened slowly. A woman stood there with calm eyes and silver hair. Time seemed to stop between them. Lena felt a strange recognition without understanding why. The woman looked at Lena carefully and spoke her name. The sound of her own name shocked Lena deeply. She asked how the woman knew it. The woman stepped aside and invited her in quietly. Inside the house felt warm and lived in. Pictures filled the walls showing moments of a simple life. The woman finally spoke and said her name was Mara. Lena felt tears rise without warning. She took out the journal and placed it on the table. Mara looked at it and closed her eyes slowly. Her hands shook as she touched the cover. Years of silence filled the space between them. Mara whispered a name that Lena recognized as her mother. They sat together without words for a long moment. The past moved between them like a shared memory. Mara spoke softly about leaving and the fear she carried. She spoke of love that never faded even with distance. Lena listened with an open heart and no anger. She realized this meeting was not about blame. Mara looked at Lena and smiled through tears. She said she had waited many years for this moment. She said the cabin was a place of truth for both sisters. Lena felt a deep sense of peace hearing those words. The journey had led her exactly where she needed to be. But she knew one truth still remained unspoken. Lena and Mara sat across from each other as the quiet room held their shared past. The sea breeze moved gently through the open window. Mara's hands rested on the table and her eyes stayed on the journal. She began to speak slowly, as if choosing each word with care. She told Lena about the night she left the mountain town. Fear and love walked beside her during every step of that journey. Mara explained that she was younger and unsure of herself. She felt trapped between duty and the desire to breathe freely. The world beyond the mountain called to her with promise. She believed leaving was the only way to protect the people she loved. Silence became her shield against regret. Years passed, and silence slowly turned into distance. Lena listened without interrupting, and allowed the story to unfold. She felt the pain in Mara's voice and understood it deeply. The journal now felt alive through Mara's words. Lena realized that her mother carried the same pain quietly. Both sisters loved each other, but fear kept them apart. Understanding replaced confusion inside Lena's heart. Mara spoke about building a new life near the sea. She worked simple jobs and found peace in routine. The sound of waves helped her heal slowly. She changed her name to avoid being found. Not because she lacked love, but because she lacked courage. Every year she thought about returning, but never did. Lena reached out and held Mara's hand gently. The touch felt natural and familiar. She told Mara about her mother and her quiet strength. She spoke about the cabin and the letters left behind. Mara closed her eyes and listened with tears forming. She felt both sorrow and relief hearing about her sister. They shared memories of childhood filled with laughter and dreams. They remembered walking through forests and watching the sky together. Time felt softer as they spoke about those moments. The distance of years slowly faded from the room. Lena felt a bond growing stronger with every word. She realized family could reconnect even after long silence. Mara stood up and walked toward a small cabinet near the wall. She opened it and took out a framed picture. The picture showed two young girls standing near a river. Lena recognized her mother immediately. Mara smiled and said she kept it close all these years. Love never truly left even when people did. Lena felt a deep warmth spread through her chest. She understood that the journey was not about loss. It was about healing old wounds and bringing truth into light. The cabin on the cliff was a bridge, not a grave. Her mother had planned this path with care. Lena felt grateful for that quiet guidance. Later that evening they walked together near the shore. The sun lowered into the water and painted the sky softly. Mara spoke about dreams she once had but never chased. Lena shared her own fears and hopes openly. They walked slowly and allowed silence to exist between words. The sea listened without judgment. As night arrived, Mara invited Lena to stay longer. The house felt welcoming and calm. Lena agreed, knowing there was more to learn and feel. She lay awake later thinking about her mother. The pain of loss remained but felt lighter now. Truth had given it meaning and shape. In the quiet of the night, Lena remembered the metal key. She took it from her pocket and studied it again. She asked Mara if she recognized it. Mara's face changed as recognition filled her eyes. She said the key belonged to a place they both once shared. A place connected to the final truth. Mara explained that the key opened a small room beneath the cabin. It was a space they used to hide letters and memories. Their sister left it locked for a reason. She wanted Lena to find it when the time was right. Mara believed that moment had now arrived. The truth was not complete without returning there. Lena felt a mix of fear and determination. The journey was asking her to go back once more. She knew the cabin still held something important. Something her mother wanted her to see last. Mara promised to go with her this time. The past would no longer be faced alone. They agreed to leave early the next morning. The decision felt heavy but necessary. Lena sensed that everything had led to this final return. The mountain was calling again quietly. this time with answers not questions. And Lena was ready to listen. The morning air felt cold and clear as Lena and Mara began the climb together. The path looked the same but felt different with shared footsteps. Mara moved slowly but with steady purpose beside Lena. Neither spoke much as the mountain listened quietly. Both carried memories and hope in equal measure. The journey back felt like closing a long, open circle. As they climbed higher, Lena noticed how calm Mara looked. Fear no longer ruled her face like before. The trees welcomed them with soft movement. The wind carried no warning, only patience. Lena felt stronger with Mara beside her. The mountain no longer felt lonely. When the cabin appeared near the cliff edge, Mara stopped. Her breath caught as memories rushed back. She touched the wooden wall gently as if greeting an old friend. Lena stood quietly and allowed the moment. Time slowed and respect filled the space. This place belonged to both of them. They entered the cabin together and the air felt familiar. Sunlight touched the floor through broken wood. Lena knelt near the loose boards with the metal key ready. Mara watched closely with quiet emotion. The key fit perfectly and turned without effort. The floor opened to reveal a small hidden room. Inside the space were boxes stacked carefully. Each one held letters, drawings, and simple objects. Mara gasped softly as she recognized their past. Lena reached for a small notebook resting on top. It was newer than the others and wrapped gently. Her mother's handwriting filled the first page. The notebook spoke directly to Lena with warmth. It explained why the truth was hidden for so long. It spoke of love divided by fear but never broken. It said forgiveness heals even after silence. The final words asked Lena to live freely and to bring the family back together. Lena felt tears move freely as she finished reading. Mara sat beside her and held her shoulder. Both felt release in the shared truth. The cabin no longer felt heavy or secret. It felt complete and peaceful. The past had finally been honored. They spent hours sorting memories and sharing stories. Laughter mixed with quiet sadness. The hidden room slowly emptied of secrets. The mountain seemed to breathe easier. Lena felt her heart lighten with every shared moment. Healing took shape through honesty. As evening approached, they closed the hidden space. The cabin stood proud in the fading light. Mara looked out at the valley and smiled softly. She said goodbye without fear this time. Lena felt gratitude instead of loss. The place had given all it needed to give. They walked down the mountain together slowly. The path felt kinder and more open. The wind moved gently around them. Neither rushed the descent. Each step felt like acceptance. The mountain watched silently and let them go. Back at the coastal town, life felt different. Mara no longer carried regret alone. Lena no longer carried questions alone. They shared meals and quiet talks. Family took a new form through connection. Love found space to grow again. Weeks later, Lena returned to her home. The silence there felt softer and less heavy. She placed the notebook near her bed. Memories no longer caused pain. They offered guidance and strength. Her life moved forward with purpose. Lena visited the cabin one final time alone. Not to search but to thank. She stood at the cliff and felt peace. The journey had changed her deeply. She was no longer afraid of the past. She carried it with understanding. As she left the mountain behind, Lena smiled. What she discovered inside the abandoned cabin stayed with her forever. Truth had reshaped her heart and future. The climb gave her more than answers. It gave her connection and courage. And that gift would never fade.